Hello, Grandmasters. Welcome to the week 2 update. I was very pleased to hear that a couple of you were out and about playing real tournaments. Navaneeth and Jack K both had, I think, 100-point plus gains in their tournaments. Really, really good. Okay, I am showing you a very quick game today to concentrate just on two things in particular. This is a game from the World Championship in 1978, played between Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi. I am not showing the entire game and analyzing move by move. What I'm doing instead is I want to make 2 points with you today that you come to class knowing. One, what we mean by the open game in chess. So very often chess writers talk about e4, e5 as leading to the open game. And that is because if you look at the pawn wedge in the middle of the board, right? Those pawns are put there on move one. Well, what are the two natural pawn breaks? They're d4 and f4. Now, of course, I could play f4 on move two. That would be a king's gambit. But normally that doesn't happen, right? Because there's some risk involved with playing this move. What often happens is the moves knight f3 and knight c6. Now, already on move three, I can play d4. And that is going to create an opening or an open position. Black's best move is to take. And if I want to play the Scotch game, then I would take with the knight. And if you look at the board, already you can see that white will have no difficulty at all getting those pieces out. Black is going to have to play a little bit of catch up, but that is cool. All right, great. Let's go back. You've all heard of the open Sicilian. Well, guess what? It's the same pawn break. The open Sicilian follows with knight f3. I have so many things I can do with black. We took a look at a classical game with knight to c6. And if I play the same exact move, d4, takes, there is an open Sicilian. So when you come to class, I want that to be part of your chess vocabulary. You're familiar with the idea that when black plays d5 or when white plays d4, you're going to see a position that tends to open. Okay, the opening that was played came from the Ruy Lopez, and Karpov, who won the world championship that year, has the white pieces. Okay, so he backs his bishop up, knight f6, castle, and this is what I've been playing or will play more against with Leah, who wanted some practice from the black side playing the open Ruy Lopez. And here it comes. It seems that white has ignored the e-pawn, and they have. But in return for that pawn being captured, white will now play d4. And think about what that does. The e-file, if that pawn is taken, is already going to be opened. So there's got to be some risk there for black to open that game themselves. It's very, very hard to take this with this knight in the middle of the board, right? So that's why the main move in this position is to first relieve the pressure on this knight by playing the move b5. That kicks the bishop back to b3, and now d5. So there's already a white pawn missing from the center. There's tension between two more pawns, and that tension gets released now, so white gets their pawn back. So we went from a position that started with the 4 center pawns, and already we have a white pawn in black's territory. 2 pawns have disappeared. The game is opening. And I do recall hearing Garry Kasparov say once, who another world champion, that it was real important that players use an opening like the open Ruy Lopez, because it teaches you how not to waste time. Because the board is open, you have to make sure you're getting the most value out of your pieces. Okay, the theory here continues with bishop to e6, and this is not an opening lesson. The move c3 is played here. That move kind of keeps an eye on d4, and you get to tuck this bishop in and keep it. Karpov, and remember this game was played in 1978, played knight b to d2, immediately challenging the bishop. In my game with Leah last Sunday, she took right away, and I think the computers actually like queen takes a little bit better, but I just took with the bishop, and we got some equal position that Leah won in the end game. I got a little cute, and Leah punished me. Anyway, so let's go back. So after knight b to d2, Korchnoi goes for the bishop. Karpov now plays c3. So he's willing to give up the bishop pair. For example, if you were to take this bishop, the knight on d2 would take back. And then you would see that there's a pawn, two knights, and a queen controlling the d4 square. So white's just going to throw their pieces in and out of there. And, it's not so easy. I'll just give you an example. If you came here and, well, actually, you don't want to do that, right? You'll lose a bishop. But if you were to develop the bishop here, and then I park a knight in here, if you ever take, just comfortably take back with the pawn, and white has a nice space advantage. Black has two bishops. Of course, we have a chess game to play, but both players are willing to go down that line if it came about. But that's not what happened here. After c3, Korchnoi played the move g6. Now, in 78, this move was not very popular, and it's not that popular today, and it could be because of this game. You have to remember, something played in 1978, there's like 40 plus years of theory that these players get to build on. And now a very interesting moment, which is going to lead us to part two, the second thing that I want you to remember. What was the first one? What is the open game? The second one is how to analyze a position when our opponent has their king stuck in the middle. And that's exactly what happens in this game. So Korchnoi continues with his development with bishop to g7. And it's at this point that Karpov sacrifices this, the e-pawn. There's several reasons for that. Number one, it's going to take away the last pawn on the e-file. You see, the king. Number two, when your king is secure, very often a pawn sacrifice can be disruptive to your opponent. Now, how does he sack the pawn? He plays knight to d4. And now black has an issue because the knight's hanging. You have to be very careful about that. So what do? So he took the pawn. He accepted the sacrifice and took on e5. Now my computer, for the moment, has decided to be quite stubborn. And that's really annoying. Let's see if I can get this thing fixed. Okay, I hope you didn't miss much here. My computer just suddenly decided to be very annoying. All right, so let me back this up. Just a couple of moves here. Here we go. All right, here is the pawn sacrifice. The knight accepts, and now f4. f4 hits the knight, which is going to center itself. And what's the follow-up? f5. Beautiful pawn sacrifice. Pawn has to take because the bishop is pinned. And when the pawn takes, the knight jumps into the f5 square. And this is a chance where I would advise you to pause your video and ask yourself a very simple question. Do you have enough for the pawn? Black, for their part, has all their minor pieces developed. They are up a pawn. The position seems reasonable to me. The problem is time. The bishop on g7 is hanging. If you castle into the king side of the board, it is completely wide open over here, and things could end very badly for you. So Korchnoi decides to play rook to g8. Now, key moment, how to keep the initiative. Well, what is black's best piece here? This bishop is attacked and it's hitting a brick wall. I wouldn't say that right away this is their best piece. I might consider it to be the knight on c4. So what Karpov does is he trades what he feels is black's best piece, and at the same time you see that it develops the dark squared bishop. So the piece is taken back, the bishop naturally goes to c2, and now the knight comes in. And there's the move. You could say the bishop could take, clearly could. The knight would take back, and now there is a fair amount of pressure on f7. If this were to occur, you have to defend this pawn because this bishop is pinned. If you defend it the very natural way, a continuation might be, and this also happens in the real game, bringing in the last piece, rook a to d1. And I put all of these comments into the chat. And I just feel, you can cover up your pin. We're going to get our pawn back. And this looks pretty pleasant for black. The pawn structure is really worse for black. And this knight is going to find its way back into the game. And you could have a pretty fun time with this with the white pieces. I wouldn't trade rooks here. I would consider just lining up and keeping the pressure. And yeah, this looks pretty good. Okay. So after bishop h6, Korchnoi decides to drop back. So pause your video. What would you do? Do you take on f8 right away? Nope. He plays exactly the same idea, bringing in the last piece. Korchnoi is under an enormous amount of pressure. So what does he decide to do? He plays queen to d5. Critical moment in the game. Critical. Because if allowed, if you give black a free move, he's going to castle queenside, which with all of these holes on the board looks a little bit scary, but it's black that has these two bishops. This one is kind of locked in down here, and it's very, very hard for white to exploit these weak squares near the king. Plus, don't forget, they have an open file leading to the king, number one, and number two, they have an extra pawn. So you have to act fast. Again, as I mentioned, part two, or the second thing I want you to learn, besides what an open game is, how to play when your opponent's king is stuck. Do not give them time. Take the knight, pawn takes, do not trade queens. You take with the rook, the queen retreats to c6, and now bishop takes f8. And you have to be a little bit careful here. If you take with the rook, you're going to get hit with this move, with knight to d4, which hits the queen. And you have to be really, really careful about these moves in this position. Your king is totally stuck in the middle of the board. I can also play check, which I think is actually stronger if the rook takes right away. Yeah, I think this check is even stronger. That's correct. It's this move here. And if king e7, you can just keep a lot of pressure. I like the move queen f2 here. And if you pause your video, you can see why. There's all sorts of threats and pressure coming up in this position. So what happens is, after he took that bishop on f8, Korchnoi found this really cool check. And again, if you were to take with the king right away, now knight d4. This was the move I was talking about before. This bishop is pinned. So if you put your queen here to pin my knight, I'm just going to take the bishop with the queen, and this is lights out. You're going to be down a whole piece here. Not good. But Korchnoi was very clever. Instead of taking the bishop, he throws in this check, which gets the queen off that line. Well, how do you get out of check? Do you trade queens? No, of course not. King into the corner. King took. And now how to continue. How do we steal a tempo? How do we win something here, or attempt to win something so that black just really stays on the back foot? And it's queen f3, attacking the loose rook. Rook goes to e8, knight h6. Every move keeping up pressure. Look at the black king stuck in this box up here. Rook went up to g7. And this is another time when I would really ask that you stop your video. How should white continue? You have all four pieces in the game. Look for a tactical shot. Sure enough, rook d7. Pretty cool. Look at the pressure on f7. Every last power piece for white is all pointing at f7. You can't take it. If you take it, we give up the queen to get the king. Nice combination, right? So Korchnoi tries to give the king an escape square, but he runs into knight takes f7. Game over. What do? If you take it here, you're just going to get crunched on this line, right? You guys should all see that. You're going to get absolutely crunched on that line. So after knight takes f7, I believe here he resigned. Oh, no. I'm sorry. He did take, he took the rook. He took the rook. That's right. This is the game continuation. So white to play and win. Pause your video. Nice. Knight d8, discovered check, ends the game in all variations. Whatever you block with, I take. And if you move your king, there's a beautiful finish. All right. Okay, my friends, remember the open game and how to play when your opponent's king is in the middle. I'll see you Tuesday and Wednesday.